Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. The desire to create a slush fund to reward political loyalists doesn't appear to start and stop with Donald J. Trump. Shocking new reporting by MS Now's Ken Dilanian finds that embattled FBI Director Kash Patel stands accused of using more than $1 million in taxpayer funds to reward the FBI agents who went after Patel's enemies and who covered up Kash Patel's misbehavior in office, weakening our nation's chief law enforcement agency in the process. Our Ken Dilanian reports this about a letter that ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, sent to Kash Patel. It reads, quote, "The letter says the money went to special agents serving on his director's advisory team, which Raskin's letter describes as, quote, a curated group of agents who are willing to carry out your unlawful partisan and personal orders. It went to agents on Patel's security detail, quote, circumventing the mandatory maximum pay caps established by statute. By issuing these side payments, your office may be knowingly breaking the federal law," the letter says. In some cases, nearly 8,000 payments have been made to nearly $8,000 payments have been made to multiple individuals every 2-week pay period, despite many of the beneficiaries of your selective generosity already maxing out on a federal employee's salary. The letter goes on to say it is unclear exactly how much each of the agents has received, but adds this, quote, "We can confirm that numerous loyalist employees have received at least 5 such payments in consecutive pay periods, amounting to nearly $40,000 per agent. We can also confirm you have depleted this reserve at such a frenzied rate that some of the payments have bounced back from exhausted accounts." Here's more from that stunning letter from Congressman Jamie Raskin. Quote, "We know the agents on your director's advisory team, perhaps better known as the Payback Squad, given their reported willingness to pursue political targets and overlook pesky legal obstacles like probable cause, have received a significant amount of these funds. These Payback Squad lieutenants have repaid your corrupt generosity by polygraphing FBI employees, including members of your security detail and information technology personnel suspected of not fully participating in the cover-up of your excessive drinking habits and erratic behavior, such as the famous episode in which you locked yourself out of your computer, panicked, and then told staff and allies that you had been fired. For their part, the agents on your security detail have also witnessed your indiscretions when joining you on date nights and bro trips alike. It is not clear whether these bonus payments have simply been a corrupt attempt to slide cash to friends or whether they are also meant to ensure the silence of the agents who witnessed your inebriation and accompanying professional negligence and misconduct. Either way, these freelance awards appear to constitute gross mismanagement of public funds and an abuse of authority by the director's office. The FBI has not responded to MS Now's request for comment on Congressman Raskin's letter, but it is just the latest episode that raises new alarms about Kash Patel's conduct and willingness to upend the FBI for his personal purposes. Kash Patel has hollowed out the FBI. He has repeatedly fired agents in key security positions for political purposes, a series of purges which Ken Dilanian has called, quote, without precedent in the modern history of the Bureau. Yet another member of the Trump administration weaponizing his position and putting Donald Trump's agenda and his own grievances ahead of our country's security is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. The aforementioned justice and intelligence reporter Ken Dilanian joins us. Also joining us, former assistant special agent in charge at the FBI, our national security and intelligence analyst Michael Feinberg. Ken Dilanian, it's an incredible piece of reporting on your part. It's an incredible letter on Congressman Raskin's part. It's probably an obvious question, but can you surmise if it's a whistleblower? I mean, it reads like someone from the inside has provided some sort of accounting of cash payments.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Nicole. They didn't use the term whistleblower. The House Democrats didn't, but that's certainly how it it appears that they got some information. And, of course, in the letter, they demand a series of documents and disclosures related to these payments, which they're not going to get unless and until they win back the House and next year start issuing subpoenas. And it's going to be really interesting to see how all that unfolds. But this is troubling to Democrats and to probably a lot of people on a lot of levels. I'll just pick the one that jumped out at me. If Kash Patel is awarding $8,000 per paycheck bonuses to agents on his security detail, that's a lot of money for a rank-and-file FBI agent on a government salary. And these are people who have been under the microscope because, according to the Atlantic magazine, just for example, some of them are deeply concerned about Kash Patel's drinking. And Atlantic reported that there have been occasions where they've had trouble waking him up to go to his morning meetings. And on one occasion, they had to get a breaching tool to go into his hotel room, or at least contemplated doing that. Now, he's denied all that. He's sued the Atlantic. They stand by their story. But what Jamie Raskin was wondering and allowed in the letter and raising the question about is this an attempt to keep these folks on side, or to silence them, or to engender loyalty so that they are not speaking about the things they are seeing on the detail? And these are sworn agents who are obligated to report misconduct that they're aware of, but they're in a horribly difficult position. And if they're getting paid a little bit extra on the side, that just adds to the complexity of this. And it's really not how government is supposed to work. You know, CEOs may hand out bonuses to their favorite employees, but the director of the FBI is not supposed to do that. And Raskin is also raising the question about whether these payments may be illegal, Nicole.
I mean, $4,000 a week is not just a bonus. I mean, that's an additional salary. Michael Feinberg, your initial reactions, and then we'll dive into the specific allegations here.
Yeah, look, an award system is not foreign to the FBI. It's pretty normal for agents to get cash awards through a variety of mechanisms. The numbers and the frequencies being reported by Ken, however, are highly unusual. And what's also unusual are the people to whom these awards are going. The director's advisory team, for people who don't know, is the invention of Kash Patel. It is a rogues gallery of mostly former agents who have been embittered and angry at what they see as the leftward tilt of the organization under Chris Wray. And so Kash Patel has brought back a number of agents who retired or who were fired, who were very active in the magosphere. And he's given them jobs, and he's giving them his personal investigations from what's been reported. One of them was a staffer in Jim Jordan's office. Another was a retired special agent in charge who attempted to help John Durham undermine the Russia investigations of Donald Trump during the first term. These are not normal agents. This is not the normal staff, and these awards are not how the Bureau normally functions.
I want to ask you, Ken Dilanian, about this payback squad. The term is throughout Raskin's letter. Are you able to confirm that such a term is used by Patel himself to describe this loyalist sort of squad within the FBI? I mean, that has so many alarming connotations throughout history, throughout the world.
It sure does, Nicole. Look, I've not heard that term. That was Notice reporting on that. But it's been pretty obvious that something like a payback squad has existed since the time Kash Patel was sworn into office. I mean, and they've made no secret about it. Todd Blanche has boasted on national television about the fact that Kash Patel has sought to purge every FBI agent who worked on, for example, an investigation of Donald Trump. And, you know, it seems like barely a week or two goes by that Carol Leonnig and I are reporting on the latest political firing inside the FBI. There was another one I heard about today, actually, a senior counterterrorism agent who was fired. And I've said this a million times, we've never seen this in the history of the Bureau. Even in the Hoover days, it wasn't this profound, the extent to which the director of the FBI is using, for personal and political reasons and ideological reasons, going after career public servants for simply doing their jobs, for working on cases that they were assigned to work on. And we know from Brian Driscoll's lawsuit, the lawsuit by former acting director Brian Driscoll and others who were in private meetings with Kash Patel, who essentially said that in order to keep his job, this is one of the things he had to do. He had to fire agents who had gone crosswise with Donald Trump, FBI officials who had worked on cases that the Trump White House looks disfavorably on. And again, the reason this may be going on at the Department of Agriculture, the reason we're reporting on it so intensively at the FBI is because the FBI is an extremely powerful organization that has a lot of influence on American life, and we rely on it to protect us from terrorist attacks, for example, and complex criminal schemes. And the idea that it's being run this way is very, very troubling, Nicole.
I mean, I know you say it doesn't matter, but I think it does matter. I mean, he can be deputy AG for forever, but it does matter politically, and it does matter for our country, Alex. It matters whether Republicans are willing to hold the very people that they nominate to the standards that they have given for them, which Thom Tillis laid out pretty clearly during that initial confirmation hearing.
I feel like every time we ask ourselves whether Republicans will do the right thing, it's like Lucy with the football. We keep going after it, Katie, and yet the football keeps disappearing.
But we have to ask it. We can't avoid it. We have to ask it.
Of course we do. And there is every reason to continue to put pressure on Senate Republicans, especially outgoing Republicans who literally have no skin in the game, right? Other than, I guess, wanting lucrative lobbying contracts and making sure they have access to the White House in their post-Senate careers, right? But morally and ethically, they have the only responsibilities they have are to the American people and to the Constitution. And this one is pretty clear cut. If Thom Tillis is genuinely concerned about people in the administration and specifically the deputy AG and the AG giving special treatment to January 6 offenders and rioters, Todd Blanche is doing just that. He was the mastermind of the $1.8 billion slush fund, which was set up specifically to pay out Trump loyalists who had violently stormed the Capitol. There's not a lot of wiggle room there. There's not a lot of gray area. But I trust Jake Sherman. And if Jake Sherman is saying that Thom Tillis has, settled the accounts as far as Todd Blanche and January 6th, then I'm not exactly sure what's left. I would expect that he's going to get at least through the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, I mean, I trust Jake as well. I have him on. I'd have him on every day, every moment of every day if I had the opportunity to do so. But I know he has another day job. But I just wonder, I mean, listen to what you're reporting at Punchbowl. Laura Weiss is reporting at Punchbowl, Jake. Senator Collins met with Todd Blanche on his AG nomination this morning. She says they had an extensive discussion on the anti-weaponization fund, and Blanche assured her with no equivocation at all that he won't pursue it. All right. I mean, it has like real whiffs of Collins. I'm very disappointed, but I'm okay now. Past statements. It might not matter in the confirmation process. He might get confirmed because the Republicans do always fold. But is this sort of thing going to come up in Collins's reelection campaign? Is this the sort of thing that makes Graham Plattner stronger against somebody like her, even with all of the problems that Graham Plattner has? Does it allow voters to look past all of his drama and to say, well, at least he's somebody who might stand up to what's going on and not pretend to stand up as Collins has? Jake?
Yeah, I mean, listen, nominations are, the line would be from Plattner would be that, Susan Collins has voted for somebody who is giving comfort to, who wants to pay off or has suggested to pay off people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. That's a somewhat powerful message, I assume. I mean, that is something that any candidate can use against a Republican who votes for Todd Blanche for AG. So I don't know that it definitively helps him. It certainly doesn't hurt. Listen, if I were one of these Republicans, I would be looking for the greatest amount of distance that I could put between myself and Donald Trump. If you're running in a competitive state, the president is at 39%, Katie. He's not He is at his lowest point on approval rating in his time in office. I don't understand why you would be siding with him at this point. You should be looking for the maximal amount of space that you could get with this president, because that suits your political benefit, especially after a primary. So, I mean, just from a pure politics point of view, not even talking about Blanche specifically, there is no reason for a lot of these folks to be lining up with Trump right now. I don't know how it suits them.
So, I mean, I want to get to Gavin Newsom and some other reporting that Carol has, but I'm going to hang on this for a moment with you, Alex. Why would they not distance themselves from the president when they are past a primary and they're up for a general election, one that would put them in office for another 6 years?
To try and explore the mind of an outgoing Republican incumbent to go take a trip to the Twilight Zone, Katie. My best guess would be, first of all, I think that John Thune is going to allow some members to vote against Todd Blanche's confirmation, just like he did on key votes, basically swing state, vulnerable Republicans, whether it's Susan Collins or others, so that they can say they didn't vote to confirm him, which is, the coward's way out, knowing full well that he'll get confirmation more broadly. But secondly, I would say, I think they are genuinely afraid of Trump's wrath, even if they're leaving office. They don't want the headache of him targeting them and their families. They don't want to deal with the internet onslaught. They want to make sure that they have some kind of career after they leave the Senate. They want to make money. And to do that, they need to stay in the good graces of the GOP. And Trump is the king. So to that end, I think they're really worried about what their reputation is like after they leave. They want to do just enough to say they did the right thing, but they don't actually want to have to cross that threshold. So if they're not going to vote for Todd Blanche, then they should at least get him to put down in writing formally that there will be no anti-weaponization fund inside the DOJ.
Also, try to push back on this sweetheart tax deal, this audit deal that he's given Donald Trump, not being audited for the past or for the present, neither him nor his family or his company, which is wild. Let's talk about Gavin Newsom. He's fighting back. He wants to FOIA all of the top officials that might have had a hand in this, including Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi, and some others. What might he get out of those records?
I don't think he's going to get anything, but the very asking of it is sort of masterful from a legal perspective, because one of the bases on which the Department of Justice can withhold records from Gavin Newsom is to say that they are subject to what's called the law enforcement exception under FOIA. If they do that, that's sort of proof positive for Gavin Newsom that the investigation that he believes is happening is in fact happening to the extent he thinks it's happening. Because again, Kitty, he's asked for communications not only involving the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and his predecessor, Pam Bondi, but also involving people at the White House. And so if he doesn't get them and the exception they cite is law enforcement, then Gavin Newsom gets to wave it around at a press conference and say, see, I told you, they are investigating me and they are doing it for political purposes.
Carol, do you have anything to add on the opening of an investigation into Gavin Newsom's wife from the perspective of folks at DOJ?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yes, our sources who are serious people and look at the facts and evidence in a case seriously say that there is a pretty significant case that's being pursued and has been pursued for months, probably starting sometime in early 2025, but really ratcheting up in recent months, that looks at Jennifer Seibel Newsom, Gavin Newsom's wife, and her tax filings, in particular her use, possible personal use of nonprofit funds. That is the information they're sifting through. I'm not alleging any wrongdoing. I'm just saying that people who make cases for a living and do it carefully and thoroughly and judiciously say that this case appears to be a pretty significant one.
Do we know how it came to be, whether it was the Justice Department just deciding to look into Gavin Newsom and those around him, or if it was a more organic occurrence? Carol?
Absolutely critical question, and the one that I'm trying to answer right now, which perhaps the FOIA could help with if they aren't able to cite an ongoing case, which of course they will cite an ongoing case to avoid answering this FOIA. We need to know the timeline. Did the evidence involving Gavin Newsom's wife, which sources are citing to me now, Did that come to them in the course of their investigation, say, of Gavin Newsom's chief of staff or other staff? In other words, did they start with evidence of potential wrongdoing, or did they start with a target list and find evidence of potential wrongdoing? That's the critical question. We don't know the answer to that yet. All we do know is the evidence that's been amassed to date, and there have been numerous interviews, tons of records gathered, is considered compelling by career professionals.
And let me ask you, Carol, while I have you, about Kash Patel. This morning, he posted on X about a threat to the UFC event on Sunday. He said this: on June 10th, FBI and our law enforcement partners became aware of a potential threat to the UFC America 250 event in Washington involving individuals outside of the National Capital Region. And thanks to the rapid action of this FBI, our partners, and the Department of Justice in a multi-state operation, multiple individuals are now in custody, and allegedly planned attacks were stopped cold. What else do you have on this?
So Kash Patel has a history. The FBI director has a trend, if you will, Katie, of announcing things a little prematurely on social media and on X. And this is, according to our sources, another example. Kash Patel made this public posting about this investigation when it was both sealed in court documents, meaning not open to the public, and also considered an ongoing probe where multiple suspects had not been yet arrested and taken into custody. This worried the Secret Service significantly. The Secret Service began this investigation and, of course, was joining with the FBI, partnering with the FBI on this probe, and figured out from actually a relative of one of the suspects in Cincinnati, I'm told by a source, that a person, this relative, was plotting something. And that's how this whole investigation began. But Patel's announcement on Tuesday morning, this morning, struck Secret Service officials cold. They could not believe that the FBI director chose to discuss an ongoing case that all of the partners on this investigation had decided to keep mum about it because it's sealed, legally sealed in court, or was until sometime today, and also that it was ongoing with suspects still sort of in the wind, if you will.
The pool gets completed at 4 o'clock, and the water will start to flow in, and it won't leak because it's done properly. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be American flag blue. Could you get me that picture of the how it compares in size to the biggest buildings anywhere in the world? And you can have something you're going to be very proud of, and it'll last for 50 to 100 years before you have to do anything with it. Very strong, powerful substance that we use. And we picked a color called American flag blue.
That was, of course, Donald Trump just 2 weeks ago gushing about one of his proudest achievements in 5.5 years as president, paying millions to some pool guys in a no-bid process to make the reflecting pool on the National Mall American flag blue, just in time for his big 4th of July celebration. But if you've seen it lately, it is really more Kermit the Frog green, like the Gowanus Canal or the water hazard at an abandoned mini golf course. It's so green that workers could be seen this very morning bent over, dumping jugs of hydrogen peroxide. It looked like they picked up at True Value into the water to kill the algae blooms. In a year full of metaphors that are way too on the nose, this one really has become a perfect story of the Trump administration. And like so many of Trump's deeply unpresidential obsessions, this one started with grievances about his predecessors.
It leaked and was bad, and it looked terrible. You remember President Obama tried to do it, and it failed miserably. They spent over $100 million between him and Biden. They spent much more than $100 million, and it never worked, and it was filthy dirty. We took out 12 truckloads of garbage out of this pool. It was just rotting and terrible, a terrible thing for the country.
Those numbers are totally made up, although the amount of administration did spend around $34 million to renovate the reflecting pool. Now, you probably didn't know that because Barack Obama was not constantly talking about pool repairs. He was not carrying around giant posters of the various landscaping projects around the Capitol. He was not on the phone with his own personal pool guy. But Trump is laser focused on this in a way that, well, you really wish a president was not. And so his government hired a Virginia contractor in a corrupt, non-competitive process to fix what President Obama had supposedly ruined. And they agreed to pay the firm $13.1 million, 7 times the amount Trump initially said the job would cost, because it had to be done for the big 4th of July celebration. The contractor inflated their profit margin, according to a government analysis of cost obtained by the New York Times, charging 20% for a job where the typical margin is 6 to 12%. And for what? Now, here's what I think happened. This is my hypothesis based on the publicly available information. Okay, ready for this? I think Donald Trump got in his head that the reflecting pool was just like a swimming pool, and it should look clean and clear like his swimming pool at Mar-a-Lago. And it didn't look like a swimming pool because it did not have a nice swimming pool bottom. And so if you hired some guys on a no-bid contract and you used national park entry fees to fund the whole thing, and you drove your entire motorcade over to the drain pool to survey the progress, and you painted the bottom blue, and then you refilled it with water, then it would look like a beautiful pool you could swim in. Except it's not a pool you can swim on because it's not a swimming pool. And it doesn't have the same cleaning systems or the same purpose. It's a reflecting pool full of largely stagnant water. And so, as with so many Trump schemes, Americans are now stuck with a big, ugly mess. And conservatives are stuck pretending that it is all great, just great.
I'm here at the newly renovated reflecting pool. It's painted American flag blue. And the Democrats are going to tell you, oh, there's green algae, it looks so bad. But there's pool guys cleaning it up right now. No other president would do that. But President Trump is still cleaning it up.
Does that guy realize we can see the water behind him? But that's their story. They're sticking to it. A spokesperson for the Department of Interior, which oversees the reflecting pool in all national parks, said, quote, the Obama pool reopening resulted in massive algae clumps taking over the pool's surface following years of construction that cost taxpayers millions upon millions, only to be broken in disgusting days later. Now, due to deploying the advanced nano-bubbler technology, the algae is dead and being vacuumed up as we speak. We thank President Trump for fixing the reflecting pool for good. Maybe they're right. We'll see. You can't make this stuff up, though. They hired yet another set of contractors using nano-bubbler machinery provided by a company called Green Water Solutions. It's all just Trump to a T. Focus obsessively on things that do not matter, spend taxpayer money with no accountability, screw everything up, pretend it's great improvement while leaving it to other people to clean up your mess.
Today, House staffers are on the ground in Bryan, Texas, visiting the federal prison where Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell is currently serving her 20-year prison sentence for sex trafficking. And they're investigating claims she's gotten preferential treatment after her sit-down with Todd Blanche, who, you know, wants to be the Attorney General. Joining us now is Virginia Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw, who sits on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, good to see you. I understand it is staffers from your committee and the Judiciary Committee who are at Maxwell's prison today. What are the biggest questions you want them to answer?
I think the biggest question is how and why was Ghislaine Maxwell transferred? And it came obviously on the heels of her really extraordinary interview conducted by the deputy AG at the time, Todd Blanche. You know, Pam Bondi told the committee that it was a Bureau of Prisons decision to transfer Maxwell to that cushier situation. I'm highly skeptical of that claim. So, you know, it'd be, I think, a real service if an answer to that question came out of today's visit, but I'm not sure that it will.
If these staffers do, in fact, find out that Maxwell is getting special treatment, what is it that your colleagues can do about it? We've seen a lot of reporting about how other folks inside the prison have attempted to be whistleblowers. They have faced retribution. It seems like there is something that is being hidden.
Well, one, I certainly would hope that all 100 United States senators, Democrats and Republicans, would take that information into account as they consider Todd Blanche's confirmation. In my view, he's disqualified himself in any number of ways, but if there's clear evidence that he essentially gave Ghislaine Maxwell lenient treatment in exchange for her proclaiming Donald Trump's ignorance, that would innocence rather, that would absolutely be disqualifying.
I'm glad you brought that up. Todd Blanche is meeting with senators this week. Interestingly, I was on with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse earlier. He says he does not have time on his schedule currently with Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche is making the time, though, for a number of Republican senators, including Senator Cassidy, who he knows he needs to win over in order to get to the number he needs for confirmation. I think there's a lot of debate about where to press this candidate for AG, where to press this nominee for AG, because there are so many directions for Democratic senators to go. And if you had the ability to question Todd Blanche, what is it that you would most want to know, given this DOJ's efforts, weaponization, the Epstein files, so much more?
Well, I think obviously weaponization needs to be a key line of inquiry, but the Epstein files as well. And look, Todd Blanche is the one who said there were 6 million files. Todd Blanche is the one, according to Pam Bondi, who said we're only going to release the 3-ish million files that have been released because the rest are duplicates. Todd Blanche is the one that oversaw the operation to, in my view, illegally redact files that should not have been redacted, and then again illegally reveal information related to survivors of Epstein's crimes that should not have been revealed. Any way you slice it, his management of the Epstein files release process has been a complete and abject failure. To then promote him to Attorney General after that complete and abject failure would be a puzzling decision, and I hope senators won't make it.
Congressman, I saw this new reporting in the New York Times out today about what happened inside the jail where Epstein died back in 2019. The Times spoke with more than 40 inmates, jail employees, lawyers, federal officials, law enforcement officers, some of whom never talked to investigators. I know that will not surprise you, given the work you've done on the committee. The report found Epstein's behavior showed he intended to kill himself for weeks before his death. Which questions do you still have? Who do you still want to talk to when it comes to this specific question, given that it has fueled so much of the energy around the Epstein file release?
So we spoke, as you know, a few weeks ago with one of the prison guards who was present in the facility on the night that Epstein died. Look, I think the leadership of the MCC, the leadership at BOP at the time still have important questions to answer about the incredible, shocking failures that took place there. When you read that Times article and if you read the transcript of our interview with the prison guard, it really was a tragic comedy of errors in that facility that led to, as it appears, Epstein being able to kill himself. And that facility is closed, thankfully, but I have deep, deep concerns about BOP's ability to run similar facilities and ensure the safety of everyone inside those facilities, given the scope of these failures.
Congressman, before I let you go, there's reporting from CNN, a group of Epstein survivors met privately with members of your committee that includes Chairman Comer. They want more investigations. Were you in that meeting? And if so, what can you tell us about what transpired?
I was not in that meeting. I don't know that Democrats were in that meeting. I think it might have just been Comer and perhaps some Republicans, but I don't know. I have been in touch with survivors over the last week, and I think they're absolutely correct. And look, this is something we Democrats on the committee, myself and others, have been calling for some time. If there's one thing that our committee's investigation has revealed without a doubt, it is that the DOJ, FBI investigations of Epstein were wholly insufficient and inadequate across multiple administrations, by the way. They never interviewed Epstein's accountant, never interviewed Epstein's lawyer, never interviewed Les Wexner, the financier of much of the enterprise. Our committee did those interviews, but I think we have demonstrated a need for the Department of Justice to reopen this investigation, conduct those interviews and others, and follow the leads that we've developed wherever they might lead.
Congressman James Walkinshaw of the House Oversight Committee. Thank you, Congressman, so much for being with us.
Thanks.
What? It is time for the group chat. Guess who's here? Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He is now an MS Now military analyst. David French is here. I have not seen him in ages. I'm thrilled he's back, an opinion columnist for the New York Times. Pablo Torre, an MS Now contributor and host of the podcast Pablo Torre Finds Out with Meadowlark Media. And Peter Goodman. He covers the global economy for the New York Times. All right, General, you know I'm turning to you first. What is your take on how the G7 is receiving this deal with Iran, and your take on what we know about the deal with Iran?
Well, first, Stephanie, I got to congratulate you on your new show. It's great to be with you for the first time on the second day. What do we know about the deal? Well, we know it's not a deal. It's a memorandum of understanding, which is the equivalent of an agenda when you go into a business meeting or even a military meeting. Here's what we're going to talk about. So there's no substance to a deal just yet. It is going to come about with what they say to each other. What we're hearing now is the president saying one thing and the Trump administration is saying one thing in terms of what they got out of it. The Iranians, both the Ayatollah and the IRGC and the press spokesman for Iran are saying different things. And we have the U.S. press and international press saying a third thing. So we're not sure what it means. And I agree with you in terms of what the president just said. If he reads it to us, it will sound a lot like a one-page agenda. It won't be the kinds of things he's reporting have already happened. The Iranians are saying there may not be a toll in the Strait of Hormuz, but they are going to charge fees. So that kind of counters. There has been nothing said by the Iranians about what they're going to do with their nuclear capabilities, either the dust, as the president keeps calling it, or their potential for creating more. So, you know, as a military guy, having seen other negotiations like the Minsk Accords or the Paris Agreements or the Dayton Accords, I'm sorry. Those are the kind of things you get to the meat of the issue. We're nowhere close to being there yet, and everyone knows it.
Mr. French, what do you think?
Well, you know, look, my colleagues on the news side of the Times reported several days ago that one of the sticking points here was that both sides wanted to claim victory. Both sides wanted to be able to spin
But that's not a surprise, right? That would be in any situation like
this. But they figured out how to do it. And that is, well, we're going to say there's an agreement that we're not going to release, and then we're going to fill the void with propaganda.
But no one will believe that.
I know no one's going to believe it, but this is very short-term thinking. There's been short-term thinking from the beginning here. And so what Trump does is he's just continually kicking the can down the next news cycle, the next news cycle, the next news cycle, apparently in the hope that, you know, if Plan A doesn't work, Plan B can be pretending that Plan A worked long enough and loudly enough that at least his base comes on board. But I'm seeing fury in parts of the Republican base here amongst those people who, against, you know, they had stuck with Trump. And one of the reasons they stuck with Trump is they said he can deal with Iran and the Democrats are too weak to deal with Iran. And then what you have here is an agreement that may actually leave Iran far stronger, not from a conventional military standpoint. They took severe losses there, but it was far stronger from a geopolitical standpoint than when the war began, which is the exact opposite of the intention.
But that's sort of what my biggest question or concern is today, right? This all started this weekend with Trump's grandest, biggest show for his birthday at the White House with the Blue Angels, with the UFC fight. And now we've got an agreement. Right. It's 11 years ago today that Donald Trump made his way down the escalator at Trump Tower and announced he's running for president. And what is he great at? Branding and messaging and selling, right? He's seen it. That's how he became.
It's a reality
right?
television presidency.
But you're now taking a reality TV presidency, and we're talking about a war that is impacting the global economy.
Correct. And supply chains don't live by reality television rules. So I agree with David. I think this is clearly designed to allow both sides to spin it the way they want to their domestic constituencies. The problem is that if the ships don't actually start moving through the Strait of Hormuz, which is going to involve human beings on ships being willing to take that risk, owners of ships worth millions of dollars taking the risk, insurance companies that have to be involved. If that doesn't actually happen, you can't spin the physical shortage of critical commodities. And it's not just oil and gas. It's fertilizer, which I guess we'll get into in terms of malnutrition. I mean, all of the ways in which the global economy has been disrupted, that continues to get worse until you can break this logjam. And let's remember that the best case scenario for this MOU, which has been described as like a table of contents for a deal, not a real deal, the best case scenario is that we end up in what was the status quo before the war, because there were no tolls or fees or surcharges or whatever you want to call them. Ships could move. And until that happens again, we're something less than status quo. And the people in control of the markets, there's now risk in this supply chain for energy, whatever happens that wasn't there before.
Then is there a risk that this G7 actually reveals Trump as a reality TV president? Because you've got these other world leaders who full well know without these details, and who had to sit there in that audience while President said Iran will never, ever, not ever, ever in the history of ever have nuclear capabilities again. If the rest of the G7 actually says, no, thank you, this is foolish, this is nonsensical, what does that do to the United States as a superpower?
I just want to point out that I don't think any world leader is waking up today thinking, I got this one wrong. Donald Trump, it turns out, is not a reliable narrator. I think everybody has known that.
Yes, but they've been able to sort of ice skate through this because diplomacy matters.
Right. And so the difference now is here is a war that domestically is unpopular, that Congress seems to be asleep, contemplating. Like, when are we going to get involved here? When are we going to take the steering wheel back from this president? The reality, though, of like what Donald Trump is as he goes to the G7 is he's a boxing promoter. There's a great line from Bob Arum, the former great boxing promoter. Yesterday I was lying. Today I'm telling the truth. That's what he is. And so when he says it's a fee and not a toll, it's a memorandum of understanding, which is the same thing as an agreement. When he says no nuclear weapons, but the civilian nuclear technology, well, that might be developed. When he says, when his administration is signaling through leaks, this may cost $300 billion.
Billion with a B.
But that's Iran's own money that they're just going to unlock. It's like, at a certain point, the American people, the hope here is that the G7 might be a weather vane, but the American people are going to say, to David's point, this is our money you're burning. That's where it comes home to roost.
Then is Pablo right? Is Congress asleep, or are they hiding under the covers?
Well, a couple of them are starting to wake up a little bit. You had a House vote that was very interesting under the War Powers Resolution, where a few Republicans defected and a majority of the House was signaling this thing all needs to wind down. I think you have the Senate, which is the Republicans of the Senate are angrier at Trump than they've ever been, not for a good reason. I mean, not because of all of Trump's incompetence, but because Trump has turned on some of their colleagues, like Shocking. Senator Cassidy and Cornyn and all of this. So they're getting angry at Trump. And so Trump's ability to sort of command Congress, be the puppet master of Congress, is diminishing. And all of this is the fruit of the poisonous decision not to go to the American people. If you don't go to the American people, if you don't go to Congress, then what happens?
You don't talk to the G7.
You don't talk to your allies.
Or your allies.
Right. If you don't talk to any of these people, you don't go to the UN, you don't go to your allies, you don't go to Congress, what happens? Democracies then go into war with no staying power, with no ability to survive adversity, because there's no public support, there's no public buy-in. And here's the thing, that demand in the Constitution for public support exists for very good reasons. It's not just a technicality. And we're seeing the reasons why now. A president of the United States has no bargaining position. A president of the United States is having to spin furiously about a war that it never should have launched, an illegal war he never should have launched. And now we're reaping the consequences of all of that. And had he gone to the American people likely would have said no to him for all of the reasons we're experiencing now.
General, President Trump was asked today about Israel and the fact that they are keeping forces in Lebanon, and I want to share his response.
Can this deal survive if Israel attacks Lebanon?
It can, and, I consider that the minor war. Iran's a big one, but we have that a little pinprick out there that constantly rears its head, and that's Hezbollah. And, I was very responsible for Syria, and the man that's running Syria now is a person that I put there along with President Erdogan and some others. He's done an amazing job of pulling it together. I suggested to Israel to let Syria take care of Hezbollah. Because to be honest with you, I think they do a better job of doing it.
Okay, so my response to that is, say what? What do you think?
It's a fantasy from a variety of angles. First of all, calling Hezbollah a little pinprick. They have about 700,000 fighters inside of Lebanon. That's the intelligence estimate. They have been a bane on the soul of Israel for the last, 30 or 40 years. They are an existential threat as a terrorist organization, as was Hamas in Gaza and are the Houthis in Yemen, all of which report back to Yemen. So just the concept of thinking that they're a little pinprick is, one, just a bizarre statement. But secondly, it just shows, again, I'll go back to what both David and Pablo were saying, how a lack of coordination and cooperation and synchronization with allies is important, and the president hasn't done that. What I'd say too, Stephanie, I watched some of the video from the G7 conference. It's interesting to me that the president seems to be, let's just say none of the other leaders are approaching him much. The body language of the other elements of the G7, they're avoiding him. When they even are taking this picture, you can see he's kind of standing there. People are talking to each other. The shots you're showing now is the picture itself, but before and after, they are avoiding him because all of those leaders know how to conduct diplomacy. They all know how to build strong alliances. They know how to tell truth to their people, even though they may spin it a little bit for political purposes. They realize that the president has none of those things right now. It is he has become a pariah in this meeting to a degree, and he's understood by most of the world leaders for being what he is and what the American people are now finding out.